problems in the air this Thursday night. The risks for people who can't escape all that wildfire smoke.
We are 100, 200 times more pollution in the air.
And concerns about where it's headed next. A $78 million prescription for the healthcare crisis, Ottawa's goal to train and retain workers. Icing out.
You could send a ship straight over the North Pole. Nothing in your way.
A summer without Arctic sea ice is coming faster than we thought. And protecting pride.
The world has gotten a little bit more hostile to us.
The fight for LGBTQ rights in the face of rising hatred.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Canada's biggest city is still shrouded in wildfire smoke, hazardous air quality affecting millions of people in Canada and the U.S. Good evening and thanks for joining us. For the third straight day, Canada's wildfires are having a far-reaching effect. It wasn't as apocalyptic looking in New York City today, but it's expected to get worse again. And that city's 8 million residents remain some of the hardest hit. Many outdoor events have been canceled. The city's public schools are shifting to remote learning tomorrow. Airports in the region have delayed or canceled some flights. Here is the scale of the situation. Smoke or haze to varying degrees covered most of Canada at one point today. The worst of it lies in eastern Canada and northeastern United States, where dense smoke, shown here in brown, blanketed large parts of southwestern Ontario and several major American cities. New York State is dispatching forest rangers to help in Quebec. Fire crews from other U.S. states are helping too. What all of this has done is focus attention on the connection between wildfires and air quality. Eric Sorensen begins our coverage tonight.
Construction sites stir up dust and fumes at the best of times.
Yeah, we're always working with dust. Exhaust.
Now add smoke from wildfires on top of that.
Last 2 days very bad, like the smell is like different, like some snow game.
And while some are putting on masks, many without are still working outside amid some of the highest concentrations of smoky air that several Ontario communities have ever seen.
This is fine particulate matter, but over the previous few days, we are 100, 200 times more pollution in the air than we'd normally expect to see. And honestly, it's off our charts.
People with pre-existing respiratory conditions are most at risk.
And often these high concentrations can trigger, especially people with asthma.
Canadian smoke has become an unwelcome export south of the border, where New York's skyline was almost blotted out.
Smoke from the wildfires in eastern Canada blanket the region.
We continue to see the smoke pour in from our northern neighbor.
The smoke has grounded or delayed hundreds of flights and threatened this weekend's Belmont Stakes, the final event in horse racing's Triple Crown.
We have instituted enhanced measures to protect the horses, the riders and the spectators.
Smoke is enveloping not only much of this country and the United States, it's now spreading east over the Atlantic. They're expecting hazy skies as far away as Europe.
The smoke has swirled over Greenland and Iceland in recent days, and this modeling shows Norway can expect haze from Canada's wildfires any time now. It's all been brought on by months of dry conditions that have made Canada and its immense forests a global tinderbox.
I've never seen it this dry in the last 100 years. If you look across Canada, it's Canada dry from coast to coast.
The conditions suggest a dry summer ahead, and with global warming, more extreme summers to come. But it's not all uphill. At least in the next few days, winds are expected to shift in densely populated southern Ontario, where a little rain might help too. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Air quality in Toronto improved a bit this morning. It's deteriorating again, though. Many Ontario school boards cancelled outdoor recess and field trips today. Daycares kept kids inside. The Toronto Zoo closed early. Woodbine Racetrack cancelled live horse racing today. People who don't have homes, especially those who have breathing and heart conditions, have few options. Catherine Ward on the calls to do more to help the most vulnerable.
There's no amount of pollution that's safe for our lungs.
Close the windows. Shut the doors. Run the air purifier. This is the advice Canadians are being asked to follow as dirty air chokes the country. But what if going inside is not possible? Respiratory therapist Sarah Hahn says it's a real problem for those without housing.
They're the ones who are the most vulnerable. They're the ones who don't have the tools needed in place to have healthy lungs.
Statistics Canada estimates more than 235,000 people experience homelessness every year. On a given night, there are some 25 to 35,000 people in need of a roof over their heads. Experts say numbers tend to go up when the weather gets warmer.
We know that people who are unhoused have a higher prevalence of cardiovascular and respiratory disease.
Dr. Neetu Garcha works with vulnerable people and hears about their struggles firsthand.
You know, I'm hearing that it's not easy to breathe out there. People who experience homelessness are quite ill and deal with significant multiple medical conditions, typically all at the same time.
Federal Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos expressed concern when asked about the issue.
It's completely unacceptable that in a developed country like Canada, people cannot have a roof over their head.
He says there is money earmarked to help.
But these resources are channeled through community organizations.
But advocates want to see more done to open up indoor spaces while these conditions linger.
I really wonder why it isn't, normal practice to have indoor spaces with clean air available for unhoused people, and the ability for our governments to be able to scale up in response urgently.
Catherine Ward, Global News, Toronto.
In Quebec, there are no new evacuations happening right now, and the Premier says the fire situation has stabilized, but more than 130 active fires are still burning and more than 13,000 people are out of their homes. The number of hectares burned this year is roughly 500 times the 10-year average. Parts of Quebec may not get any rain until next week. Mike Armstrong reports on the towns most at risk, including one where the flames are just 500 meters away.
This is one of the spots that has authorities most nervous. Crews are digging a massive fire break at one end of Sainte-Terre, a town of 1,100 people. They're taking out the vegetation and then spreading water on the earth. In a Facebook Live post to the community, the mayor says they're hoping winds don't pick up, but that people should be ready to move in case they do. Now, in the communities that have already been evacuated, the wind situation has helped. Flames came within 500 meters of the town of Nord-Métal, but no homes or structures were lost. Between water bombers in the air and fire breaks on the ground, crews were able to hold the fire back. Different winds would have meant a different story.
It was the flank of the fire that was coming near the community. It was not the head of the fire.
The forecast for the coming days doesn't have much wind, but it also doesn't have much rain. About 13,500 people have been forced to leave their homes. Most of those are unlikely to be able to go back until Tuesday at the earliest. The Cree community of Oujabougoumu ordered an evacuation Wednesday. The deputy chief says it did feel strange after following news of wildfires across the country.
You know, just a couple of days ago, we were looking at that. And here we are. It's on us.
Now, as northwestern Quebec struggles, there has been an improvement in the east. Rain in recent days has dampened fires enough that people in Sept-Îles were able to return to their homes. Many of the resources that were fighting those fires are now being moved west. Firefighters from France are arriving Thursday. They'll head there as well. The province is targeting the drier Abitibi region with just about all the resources it can muster. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
In BC, about 80 fires are burning. That province has released its seasonal fire forecast, and drier than normal conditions are expected right through the summer.
Already, the number of hectares burned this season exceeds the total number of hectares burned in 16 of the last 20 wildfire seasons.
The Donny Creek fire in northern BC is still burning out of control. It's consumed more than 300,000 hectares of forest. The Cameron Bluffs fire near Port Alberni, BC, grew overnight, and it closed the only major highway in the area. We know a record number of Canadians don't have a family doctor right now, and there are serious staffing shortages in hospitals too. Some doctors in British Columbia are sounding the alarm, putting a renewed focus on the state of some emergency rooms. And now the BC government has responded. There's some assistance as well from the federal government to help retain more healthcare workers. Neetu Garcha explains.
Surrey Memorial is the only hospital in British Columbia's second most populous city. And after a series of letters from doctors here raising the alarm about the management of patient care, the province has announced an immediate and long-term expansion.
These are significant actions, but they are doable.
BC's health minister says the expanded emergency and maternity services will be immediate, and a long list of around 30 steps will also help improve the situation right away.
He personally gave me a guarantee, and I think that's a good thing.
That's saying a lot, coming from a physician who's been among those most critical of the chronic issues for patients and staff.
I'm very positive right now.
Some of the Surrey ER doctors we've talked to say the province's promises fall woefully short of the long-term needs here. But Dr. Urbane Ip says the announced changes have made many feel heard.
I hope all the health ministers across the country is going to look at us and see what the ministry can do for their citizens.
Across the country, the ER crisis continues to affect patient care.
I had one patient that stayed in the department for 90 hours recently, awaiting care that never came. Patients being resuscitated on the floor because there is no stretcher to put them in.
Experiences like this have the Canadian Medical Association welcoming the federal health minister's latest initiative, $78 million in 3 investments, including a national physicians registry.
Today's announcement will help advance our commitment to support the recruitment and retention of our health workers.
The crisis is not over. When Canadians hear an announcement of a number, multiply that by 2 to 10, and that's probably the amount of resources we'll need to actually fix this problem.
He says the longer it takes for more commitments to fix the problems long term, the more costly it will become, both financially and in terms of patient suffering. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Surrey, BC.
In Ukraine, 5 people are reported to have died in that severe flooding caused by a catastrophic dam collapse on Tuesday. President Volodymyr Zelensky toured the area today to assess the damage, and he met with officials to discuss emergency plans for the more than 1,000 people displaced. The governor says about 60,000 hectares of land are underwater, most of it on the Russian-occupied side of the Dnipro River. Rescue efforts are ongoing and water levels are still rising in some places. It's left hundreds of thousands of people without clean drinking water, and drones are being used to deliver bottled water. There's another worry. The flooding has dislodged huge numbers of landmines, sending them downstream. In France, 4 children who were stabbed in a park are now in stable condition. The stabbings happened at a playground in Annecy, in a town in the French Alps. The children range in age from 22 months to 3 years, and witnesses say at least one of them was in a stroller. An adult was also critically injured. Police intervened and the suspect was shot in the legs. Police say he's a 31-year-old Syrian who had refugee status in Sweden. Plenty of Canadians are gearing up for road trips this summer, coming up where gas prices are expected to go in the next few months. Summer is around the corner, and with the cost of living and airfares still high, Canadians may think twice about pricier vacations abroad. Road trips here at home are another option. That's drawing more attention to what gas prices will look like this season. And Gaviola has a look at what to expect at the pumps.
Many budget-conscious households are hitting the open road this summer. Ross Bidar is taking his young family to cottage country.
We have a plan for going to Tobermory on the 30th.
Travel plans bolstered by gas prices that are down significantly compared to this time last year. The national average price per litre is $1.60. That's down about 50 cents from 2022. However, you can expect to pay a lot more in some parts of the country, like Metro Vancouver, where it's close to $2 a litre. According to Gas Buddy, recent decisions by OPEC+, the cartel of oil-exporting nations, to cut supply could push the price of oil higher.
OPEC is playing a dangerous game that it wants to drive up prices in the short term, but in the long term, it risks that policy spiraling out of control.
This is Gas Buddy analyst Patrick DeHaan's summer forecast.
Most of the summer, most of Canada would be between $1.45 to as high as $1.75 or $1.80.
There's a big range because it's hard to predict the severity of this hurricane season or foresee unexpected events like refinery disruptions that can squeeze supply and boost prices. But he figures we'll likely end the summer with prices on the lower end of his forecast.
I usually try and fill up where I know it's cheap.
This car enthusiast and his family flew abroad last summer.
everybody thinks that you need to get away to, like, on a plane or somewhere like that, but truthfully, there's lots of stuff to do in Canada and the US that you could easily do by car.
This year, they're hitting the highways and country roads. Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
Spectacular sight ahead. One of the world's most active volcanoes is at it again. The Kilauea volcano, one of the most active in the world, is putting on a show again on Hawaii's Big Island. After a 3-month break, volcanic activity was detected again on Wednesday morning. It is contained within a closed space of the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Well, there are new signs the global climate crisis is unfolding quicker than scientists expected. New research shows the Arctic is warming faster than ever. The data published in the journal Nature says within the next few decades, Arctic summer ice will all but disappear. Heather Yourex-West reports on what that could mean.
In the Arctic, including Canada's north, ice is an important part of life for polar bears and the people who call this region home. But a new study reveals the frozen sheets over these northern waters are actually disappearing faster than previously thought, and our window of time to save that summer ice has now closed.
We find that even in the emission scenario with the lowest emissions, we still see an ice-free Arctic by the middle of the century.
Since satellite records began in 1979, summer Arctic ice has already decreased dramatically from a high of more than 7 million square kilometers to just over 4 million square kilometers in 2022. Projections suggest that most of that September ice will disappear within the next few decades.
That means that you could send a ship straight over the North Pole. Open water, nothing in your way.
Future opportunities for shipping and cruise ship travel will be tempered by ecological costs. Loss of sea ice in the summer puts Canada's already vulnerable polar bear population in further jeopardy, while threatening to forever change the way of life in northern communities. There's also growing evidence that lower latitudes will see impacts too.
There is a theory that if you take away the sea ice, that changes the atmosphere over the Arctic,
which some climate experts believe could lead to a weakened polar jet stream.
So a weakening jet stream would affect weather patterns, causing slower moving systems, which could lead to flooding and more active weather. It would also allow strong areas of high pressure, like a summer heat dome and a polar vortex, to dominate for longer,
leading to even more weather emergencies. The loss of Arctic sea ice in the summer now inevitable. It's the rest of the year we can still work to protect. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Political pride next, why representation on Parliament Hill impacts all Canadians. There's turmoil in New Brunswick's legislature after the province announced changes to a policy protecting LGBTQ students in schools. The 3 changes include not allowing students under the age of 16 to officially change their names or pronouns without parental consent. 8 members of Premier Blaine Higgs' caucus refused to take part in legislative business today because they say they're extremely disappointed in the lack of process and transparency. The Premier says he is prepared to fight an election over the issue if need be. It is Pride Month, a time to celebrate gay and trans identities. Yet around the world, there is rising hostility targeting those communities, from harsh new laws and policies to open aggression. After so much progress in the past decades, it feels like a slide backwards, and Canada is not immune. Tonight, Turia Isri looks at the effect this is having on those who run for public office.
Pride Month is a time to openly celebrate being queer. But for many, the world feels like it's closing in.
The world has gotten a little bit more hostile to us.
That hostility is hanging over celebrations.
But we've been reminded by a rise in anger, hatred, and ignorance.
The federal government is spending $1.5 million to boost security for Pride events nationwide. Parades, libraries,
I like my curly tail,
and school board meetings have become flashpoints for far-right protests. This year, a US-based data tracker observed a spike in anti-queer demonstrations in Canada. It's a type of polarization NDP Randall Garrison thought the country had left behind. He ran in 2011 as a proudly gay politician.
When I was first elected, I faced an onslaught of threats.
Garrison is retiring this summer and sees history repeat itself.
And that had basically gone away until the pandemic. And now that level of rhetoric and threat has increased again.
We will not accept going back.
Blake Desjardins is the first Two-Spirit member of Parliament and thanks Garrison for paving the way.
He's also showed me the part that most Canadians, I think, forget about, which is the distance we have to go still.
Today, there are 9 queer MPs serving on the Hill, more than at any other time. But that's out of 333. It's a lot to sign up for. Online vitriol and American-style politics are spilling into the Canadian discourse. And that climate may be keeping queer candidates away.
We need to see some strong political will that will enable a culture for people who are like myself, who are Black women, who are in the LGBTQ community, to feel safe enough to want to even take on a leadership position.
And maybe one day there'll be a trans member of parliament.
That's something Garrison also wants to see.
A more diverse parliament makes better laws,
which he says better reflects all Canadians. Taria Isri, Global News, Ottawa.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is this abandoned house in Langley, British Columbia. Thanks for watching. Farah Nasser will be at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I will see you again on Monday. Bye-bye.